sunlight fuels Spaceship Earth. Humanity has built an engine that uses that fuel in its most powerful form. But now we are forced to ask, how far can it take us?
Fire made us human in the past few hundred years, and fossil fuels made us modern. And now we burn each year in the world 19 cubic kilometers of these rotted remains of primeval swamp goo. The fossil fuels have created our wealth. They've really created our civilization. They have enriched the lives of billions of people. But they have rising costs to our security, economy, and environment that are eroding, if not outweighing, their benefits. That's why we need a new fire that makes us safe, secure, healthy, and durable.
You have to look at the scale of our energy supply system. It's huge. It's been built up over more than a century. You're not going to quickly replace it. The amount of investment that would be required would be fantastic.
Oil is very unique. It's very dense. It's easy to store. It's easy to move around the world. If you project the amount of energy that's in a barrel of oil, it's about 6 billion joules of energy. And if you translate that into, how much work would that be for a human being to generate that much energy? I think it works out to in the order of 6 years. And if you had that person paid at US minimum wage, that barrel of oil would be worth, something like $140,000. That's how concentrated and valuable and useful oil is.
The fossil fuel engine shaped the technology and landscapes of the 20th century. It gave us the power to gain more power, to harness rivers, to wage new kinds of war. To unleash the energy of the atom.
Energy is the master resource.
That resource is provided via a system that wraps around Spaceship Earth.
We're burning 88 million barrels of oil per day. That's the rate of supply that's required to run society.
Fossil fuels also involve huge flows of money. The oil money often fuels tyranny, instability, and corruption. It is behind many of the conflicts in the world. We actually pay about 10 times more to sustain military forces meant to intervene in the Persian Gulf than we pay to buy oil from the Persian Gulf. This is obviously crazy. But it is an addiction we have fallen into and need to cure ourselves of.
If the ability to grow oil supply ceases, and that's likely to happen sometime before 2020. The geopolitical issues will only accelerate. So if we don't do anything, the prognosis is not particularly bright. I mean, for the economy, for geopolitical disruptions, for wars, for actual physical shortages.
So all of these unconventional energy sources, I do think that they'll grow rapidly, partly because a lot of the easy oil and gas is already gone. Now we have to go after these other harder sources if we want to keep the oil and gas flowing.
As the engine runs short on fuel, its pollution and violence is backing up into Western society. Nowhere is that more obvious than in domestic fights about fracking.
The natural gas and oil is found very deep under the ground. And in order to bring that oil and gas up to the surface, they drill horizontally, in many cases a couple of kilometers, and then they do the hydraulic fracturing. They open cracks up in the rock. But one of the things that makes it especially hard in the United States is that the people living on the land don't necessarily own the oil and gas below it. So we have people who own the property, may have lived in a house or on a ranch or on a farm for 20, 30, or 40 years, don't own the mineral rights. In many cases don't know that they don't own the mineral rights, and then someone else comes in and puts drilling on their property.
Yes, you have different opinions. When they heard they were coming in, a number of people are excited because most of the people have leased their land. So I would say over 90% in our county are leased. So they're encouraged to get royalties, so they're looking forward to that. So they're hoping to get some extra money. And a lot of people need money. They're in difficult situations with the economy. So they don't think about what it could mean. So for them, it's just, I'm going to get extra money. And then there's others, like myself, who are very concerned about the industrialization and the contamination.
The well is back here. December 6, 2011. We noticed it was erupting and our water turned dark gray. So the DEP came out and tested our water. The first test, the results were 38.9 milligrams per liter of methane in our water. They came back out a couple months later and retested. It had gone up to 58.4 milligrams per liter. That's in our water.
It's real funny that we had wells drilled on both sides of us, and next thing you know, we got problems problems that weren't there before, you know.
It's very controversial in our area. They drive neighbors against neighbors. People that normally wouldn't hate you because you have water problems now. And
my other half, she got all pissed off with me because I was fighting with them all the time. I was like, you know something? I'm trying to protect what we own from being destroyed. We already lost the water. And she was mad because I was constantly fighting with them. Her thing was, just lay down and be a good little gas horse. And it's like, no. So she walked out on me because of all the fighting. Other neighbors over here, they got divorced over the fighting. Neighbors over here got divorced over the fighting. And then you have neighbors pissed off because you got signs in your yard, you're fighting the industry. You have other ones that from the town, well, there's nothing wrong with our water. Well, thank God for you, you don't have a problem. But over here, we do.
Despite all of the wealth that they have created and convenience that they offer, fossil fuels are becoming quite threatening to our way of life.
é o que eu digo de uma crise civilizatória. E uma crise civilizatória não tem como ser enfrentada a não ser por todos. Uma mobilização de todo o tecido social na forma não apenas de um questionamento à nossa maneira inadequada de fazer as coisas, mas, sobretudo, um questionamento de natureza mais profunda à nossa forma inadequada de ser. É disso que se trata, e isso é válido para o Brasil, para o Japão, para a Altamira ou para Nova York.
Countries are responding to that crisis by tapping whatever energy sources they have available. In Brazil, hydropower is favored. It is one of our ship's greatest renewable resources. Globally, only about 1/3 of its potential has been tapped.
O Brasil tem uma abundância de rios. Nossa matriz energética ela é basicamente feita pelo aproveitamento dos rios. Essa riqueza natural que nós temos de energia limpa e sustentável, nós usamos diferentemente do resto do mundo. O Brasil, 70% a 80% da nossa energia é energia hidroelétrica limpa.
Brazil's biggest hydro project is on the Xingu River. The Belo Monte hydro plant will require a 26-kilometer diversion of river water to create 11 million megawatts of electricity. Local people say the project is destroying the rainforest and the river itself. The massive project was delayed repeatedly by environmental concerns and now proceeds in controversy. At a meeting with power officials, they voiced their complaints.
Belo Monte, ela não traz só o impacto ambiental, né? Mais do que o impacto ambiental, Belo Monte traz um impacto à diversidade socioambiental do Xingu. Diria que se o Xingu é o coração do Brasil, o peixe, né, é uma fonte de alimento, uma fonte de proteína muito importante para os povos indígenas e para os extrativistas e ribeirinhos dessa região. Quando você ameaça o peixe, você ameaça a segurança alimentar desses povos.
Que é exclusivamente para enganar a gente, para mentir, para quem não vai dar esse impacto todo. Só não vai dar esse impacto todo. Essa madeira eu botei de agora. Tá aqui, ó. Pouquinho. Quando é muito, quando dá bastante, a gente tira 30, 50, 60 numa rede dessa. E caride, primeiro você botava uma madeira dessa, um corte de madeira dessa com 4 madeiras, você tirava 100, 180, até 200 cari. Agora tá aí o tanto, ó. Nós pegávamos 2 caixas de 160, 3 caixas dentro de 3 dias. 2 dias, 3 dias. Hoje nós passamos 5 dias e não pega 3 caixas de 160.
Esse é um projeto muito complexo. Do ponto de vista social, há uma situação de alto impacto negativo para as populações locais. Aqui no Brasil, e eu particularmente, não temos uma posição ideológica contra as hidrelétricas, Elas são uma fonte de geração importante para o nosso país, mas não podemos ficar refém de uma única fonte de geração. Existem muitas coisas que podem ser consideradas nas zonas isoladas, como no caso da floresta amazônica ou no Nordeste, mas também dentro das grandes metrópoles temos grandes dificuldades econômicas e sociais. Mas também dentro das grandes metrópoles temos grandes dificuldades econômicas e sociais.
Other countries have found ways to tap their natural energies without creating environmental disasters.
We are very lucky. We're situated on the mid-Atlantic ridge, and where the North American and the Eurasian plates combine. We are a volcanic active country that has the geothermal resources underneath to tap into. We've been using geothermal obviously for a long time. It used to be for bathing, for heating houses. Women used it for washing clothes, and that was a big thing in Reykjavik. And then in 1930s, we started really harnessing the heat for district heating, and that was the first we used. And then later on, we started producing electricity.
Tapping that power allowed cold and barren Iceland to become self-sufficient in food.
Vegetable growing in Iceland started around 1940. Geothermal makes it possible to grow inside of these greenhouses all through the year. Iceland can produce enough vegetables, peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, anything that grows inside a greenhouse, we can produce, and we have enough geothermal energy, we have enough electricity, and we can even we can produce that much that we can feed a lot of Europe with our growing.
Underneath us is a geothermal reservoir, so we have hot water and steam in the ground, very hot, about 250 to 300 degrees Celsius. And what we do is we drill holes into that reservoir about 2 kilometers deep, get the hot steam up out of the ground, pipe it into the power plant, where we separate all hot water from it and all droplets. Take it into a turbine and generator set and produce electricity. We use the hot water that comes out of the turbine to preheat cold water from the ground, and then we heat that water even further up with the hot water and then send it to Reykjavik for district heating. I think it's about 30% of our electricity that comes from geothermal, but over 90% of our heating comes from geothermal, which has tremendous health and social benefits for the country because you don't have to worry about gas or oil to heat your houses, which we do all year round. So the rest of Iceland's electrical production comes from hydro resources. We are a very renewable country. We make our electricity with either geothermal or hydro. I think the societal benefits of geothermal district heating have been great for my country. The fact that you can heat your home with very little cost all year round. You can bathe. You never run out of hot water. Public swimming pools all over town that are open year-round. People waste energy in a way. They don't think about how they heat their homes. They know it's green and they know it doesn't cost a lot. So Icelanders, instead of turning off their radiators to cool down their homes in summer, they just open their windows. Not every country can use geothermal to supply as big a part of its electricity mix with geothermal as we can, but it can play a much bigger role in many countries. The US is the largest producer of geothermal energy in the world. The United States Geological Survey has estimated there's 30,000 megawatts of undiscovered geothermal resources in the western part of the United States. That alone, if we could harness part of that, could really boost up production. Places in Europe, Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, there's lots of places where there's fantastic resources. For instance, in Japan.
Japan is also a volcanic island with abundant geothermal resources. But its hot springs are sacred spaces. For its energy, Japan chose to rely on nuclear power, despite its terrible past.
Really, the origination of all of it was the nuclear weapons program. The atom had this ability to create energy. If you did certain things to it, you could get it to split certain atoms, and then they released this energy. After the weapons were used in Japan, and after the end of World War II, then people began to want to transition the thinking away from the weapons a little bit more to what they called peaceful uses.
This too is atomic energy, harnessed by American scientific genius to benefit all mankind through dramatic new discoveries in industry and agriculture, biology and medicine. 10,000 scientists and engineers are at work to prove that atomic energy does not mean only the atomic bomb.
That led, in many ways, to the nuclear power fleet. Most of the reactors that we have were licensed in the early 70s and between then and the early 80s. And they were designed in the 60s. After you paid for the reactor, it's cheap to operate. So that's a big factor in the staying power of nuclear. And the other piece is really the advantages from a climate perspective. People talk about nuclear as the solution to the climate problem. I don't think in the end of the day, because we don't have any real restrictions on climate emissions and carbon emissions, that utilities have actually decided to use nuclear for that purpose.
The U.S. government under President Obama launched a program to support the development of nuclear power plants because of climate change. It seemed that finally nuclear power was going to make a big comeback. It was going to expand. In Japan, it was going to be perhaps 50% of electricity. It was being reborn in the United States. And you saw around the world a very upbeat view about nuclear power. And that was what people called the nuclear renaissance, where the Chernobyl, the terrible nuclear accident of 1986, was seen as being far in the past. And then came Fukushima.
原発事故はだから私はその 当初ね、そんなにことが起こるとはとても考えられなかったですよ。ああいう、爆発が起こるとか、要するにそれなりに当然対応するだろうと。人たちが適切に処理するだろうと。そのぐらいのね、セーフティーのいろいろ何が起こったらどうって種類のことは全部手打ってあるだろうから、最悪のことにはならないだろうと思いながらずっと見てましたよね。だから
予測できなかったと、いう問題が一つね。それから2つ目はですね、今まで原子力技術というのはね、今まで原子力技術というのはね、十分安全が担保されてね、それを推進してきたというふうに私も信じていたもんですからね、それが全く裏切られてしまったと。そこでですから非常に大きな反省はね、原子力のようなひとたび事故が起きればね、大変な災害をもたらすような危険な技術をね、人類社会がね、安全に管理していけるかどうかね。
I think the damage is in some ways difficult to capture and understand. The real impact right now from the Fukushima accident, well, I think it's really twofold. Primarily, it is the people that have been evacuated from their homes. You've got about 100,000 people who have been forced out of their homes for several years now. Some of them will never be able to return. The communities that existed will never reform. Even if, from a technical and a medical or health perspective, people could come back to the area. And it's a legacy that doesn't just impact the people who've been evacuated. It is impacting their entire economy. I've seen estimates that suggest that the impact would be at least $500 billion. It shut down a significant portion of their electricity generation, which has changed the lifestyle of almost everyone in Japan. The biggest area where there'll be impact is on the ocean. The expectation is the majority of the contamination went out to the sea. You had a natural event like the tsunami, which to some extent was a localized in time event. It happened and then the waters receded and you had a tremendous tragedy with people dying. Then you had a secondary effect, which was the impact of the nuclear power plant, which is a long-term crisis. So it's almost as if that tsunami has been made to last 40 years. And to think then that it came from a place that was used to generate electricity, it just shows that, in a way, this technology has real fundamental problems that need to be addressed.
Everywhere in the world, people reconsidered nuclear power. Now it's a nuclear patchwork. So it's a very mixed picture, and it's a far less self-confident, exuberant picture than it was just a few years ago. Some countries decided to continue, like France. China had a pause and then has renewed it. Finland said yes, Abu Dhabi said yes, but nuclear power has greatly slowed down. Germany said no.
It is a deliberate decision to say the future of modern industrial societies is a climate-friendly, decarbonized industry. In Germany, people were, on the one hand, against nuclear energy, but at the same time in Germany, the mood was in favor of climate protection. Fukushima simply made clear in Germany, we will not be able to stay within nuclear anymore. And when the German government said, no, we will honor our climate pledges, we will phase out nuclear, what is the answer? Renewable energies. Why do you harvest energy in such an indirect way? Photosynthesis has an energy efficiency of 1%. So why not using the sunlight directly? It's a no-brainer, really, yeah? Even today, I mean, average efficiency rates are 12%, 15%, or sometimes 25%. Every person on this planet, more or less, has access to that energy. It is highly efficient and it has no side effects on the environment. So photosynthesis created life on Earth in the end as we know it, and it created agriculture and everything. If this is possible to create human civilization based on 1% efficiency, I'm sure we can build it based on 10% efficiency. Again, a no-brainer.
Die Maschine hier und an vergleichbaren Standorten in Deutschland produziert ungefähr 5 bis 6 Millionen Kilowattstunden je nach Windjahr. Ja, unser Ziel ist es eigentlich, dass wir zurzeit alle Privatkunden in unserem in unserem Netzbereich mit elektrischer Energie versorgen können. Das sind 190.000 Haushalte und das schaffen wir zurzeit auch mit unseren insgesamt über 100 Windmühlen, die eine nominelle Ausgangsleistung von 250 Megawatt haben. Wir haben in Deutschland eine Produktion aus der Windenergie heraus, die fast bei 10% liegt. Und von erneuerbaren Energien insgesamt sind wir, glaube ich, bei 27% zurzeit. Das heißt also, der größte Teil der erneuerbaren Energien wird aus den Windmühlen oder mit Windmühlen produziert.
In other parts of the world, wind energy has all sorts of critics.
Wind is like hydrocarbons. There's sweet spots and then there's the rest, right? Wind has to be located in very good locations. The other issue with renewables like wind and solar is intermittency. And it's storing that energy during periods when there's no wind. And the typical backup for that is fossil fuels. When the wind is blowing, we generate with wind, but when it's not, then we have to fall back on something reliable. Otherwise, the grid becomes, very unstable.
Renewable power is a challenge that electrical systems worldwide are struggling to handle. Its variability is a problem for the people who manage electrical grids.
Well, it's a balance of supply and demand is always critical. Electricity, if you have too much of it, things start to happen like your voltage starts to go up. The voltage goes up, that hurts equipment. You have too many electrons flowing through the grid. The system was designed for a different need. In the old days, you had a coal plant that would come up in the morning. You knew it was going to be at a certain amount by 9 o'clock. It would be at a certain amount by noon, be ready for the evening peak, and then it would go offline at night. So that was very predictable. Now you don't have that predictability because you've got more renewables on the system.
In Ontario, most power still comes from nuclear plants, and it always wins out over renewable energy.
Today we do have some constraints in the system, and so we're actually dispatching wind down to make sure we don't put in more megawatts than we need into the system. It's usually when we have too much baseload power on the system. That happens occasionally where you've got a nuclear plant that needs to run. Nuclear plants like to run full out. So when you've got all this wind and baseload hydroelectric and nuclear, and we don't have enough demand in the province, We have to do something about it. It's easier to take down wind for a few hours to solve a problem rather than to take a nuclear plant off for potentially 4 days. We don't actually necessarily turn the turbines off. What they'll do is they'll throttle back their blades, and you generate less electricity even though the wind's still blowing.
Actually, no power plant runs all the time. They all break sometime. And when they break, about 1/10 of the time for big stations, you just lost 1,000 megawatts in milliseconds, often without warning. A portfolio of different renewable sources, different kinds in different places, can be forecast to perform more accurately than we can forecast demand. And that portfolio of different things working at different times in different ways can then be integrated with the other kinds of renewables, not solar and wind power, but all the others which you can have whenever you want. That need for more resilient energy systems that work even if the big power grids fail is part of what's driving the rapid shift to microgrids and decentralized energy systems that work even if the grid fails.
Smart grids are just half the answer to balancing the new power supply.
Es ist so billig wie von einem Großkraftwerk, die Stromerzeugung. Das ist der Vorteil von der wirklich sehr, sehr billigen Photovoltaiktechnik inzwischen. Und dann kommt natürlich der Punkt, der Strom kommt natürlich nur, solange die Sonne scheint. Was mache ich nachts, wenn die Sonne weg ist? Und dann kommt eben die Speicherung zu tragen über Batterien. Was wir hier arbeiten, sind Batterien für die Elektromobilität und für stationäre Stromspeicherung, also stationär dezentrale Speicherung. Und man kann das sehr schön machen für einen Haushalt, den Strom speichern über die Nacht. Das ist nicht sehr viel, einige Kilowattstunden reichen da vollkommen aus. Das Spannende ist einfach, dass man das Netz entlastet, dass man also nicht mehr diese großen Schwankungen im Netz hat durch die Photovoltaik, die eingespeist wird. Das macht das Leben der Netzbetreiber sehr viel einfacher. Hinzu kommt, dass man mit einem Speicher im Haus noch sehr, sehr viel mehr Vorteile generieren kann. Ein schönes Beispiel ist das Thema Blackout. Also wenn das Netz weg ist, dann habe ich trotzdem Strom in meinem Haus und dann bin ich einfach der König. Wenn bei mir der Fernseher funktioniert und das Bier im Kühlschrank kalt ist und meine Nachbarn nichts mehr haben, dann bin ich einfach der Beste im Viertel.
In North America, there is considerable opposition to wind farms.
Oh, we thought they were a good idea when we first heard that they were going up, say, in the Ripley area, until a fellow that I used to work with years ago, he was getting sick, and his wife especially was getting really sick.
People who live near windmills complain about the noise, vibration, and the controversial phenomenon of dirty electricity, exposing them to electromagnetic energy.
The windmills didn't start until 2008, and it was 2009 when they tied all those lines in together over at the corner, and it was after that that we started having the problem. I developed tinnitus, and Wayne developed tinnitus 2 weeks after I did. And we also started having headaches and nausea as well.
I figure it's the dirty electricity coming out of those things is what's doing it. It's almost like living in a microwave. Yeah, we just had to get away, like, or we weren't going to survive. When you went to the windmill company and said, listen, we've got a problem here, they'd say, you better go talk to Hydro One. So we'd phone Hydro One and get the top dog there, and he'd say, no, you've got to talk to the windmill company. So that was their way of dealing with it.
One lady was very angry one day when I talked to her, and she said, talk to either your MP or your wind company. Don't talk to us. Maybe they think that I'm imagining things, I don't know.
They might think we're a couple of nutcases, I don't know. You have to experience it before you'd really believe it, you know.
Es gibt in unserer Gesellschaft immer Menschen, die unter technischen Aspekten leiden müssen. Das sind die Anwohner einer Autobahn oder die Menschen, die in der Nähe von einem Flugplatz wohnen. Und dementsprechend muss man natürlich auch in der Energieproduktion letztendlich akzeptieren und tolerieren, dass ja, Produktionsstätten eben auch in der Nähe von Menschen gebaut werden.
But in Germany, wind farm complaints are fewer, partly because towns own the systems.
Wenn Menschen von den Kraftwerken betroffen sind, durch eben den visuellen Impact, den wir dort haben, ist es natürlich auch nur gerecht, wenn sie an den Kraftwerken selber mit verdienen. Ja, ich kann mich noch ziemlich gut an mein Studium erinnern, an eine sehr eindrucksvolle Skizze. Da wurde in einem, sage ich mal, großen Würfel aufgezeigt, wie viel Energie die Sonne uns täglich liefert und wie viel Energie wir als Menschen oder weltweit eben benötigen. Und die Dimensionen waren, von so einem großen Rechteck haben wir eine ganz kleine Ecke benötigt. Es sieht also letztendlich so aus, dass wir ein Vielfaches an Solarenergie-Input in unser Raumschiff Erde haben, von dem wir eben nur einen sehr geringen Anteil brauchen. Die große Frage dabei ist, dass wir uns als Menschheit in eine andere Art von Wirtschaften bewegen müssen. Wir müssen von einer Brennstoffwelt in eine solare Welt umschalten. Und das ist eine wahre Herausforderung für die Menschen.
This is an outstanding event in human history. Germany, as a leading industrial force on this planet, saying we embark on the great transition towards sustainability.
There's not a chance that collectively renewables can replace current energy throughput. In 2011, primary energy was 33% oil, 30% coal, 24% gas, 6% large hydro, 4% nuclear, and 1.59% non-hydro renewables. And that includes wind, solar, geothermal, and burning biomass. That's where we're starting from. The biggest piece of the solution is figuring out how to lower our energy throughput a lot without, radically reducing people's standards of living. Not going to be easy. It really needs a new paradigm.